Now, meanwhile, in the U.S., Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd are making a case on Capitol Hill for billions of dollars in emergency funds for Israel and Ukraine. They are testifying in front of a Senate committee. The CBC's Peter Armstrong joins us now live in Washington with more on this. So, Peter, Blinken and Austin have said that supporting Ukraine and Israel is crucial to advancing U.S. foreign policy interests, but the hearing was interrupted before it even got underway. So why don't we start there?
Indeed. As they literally moments into the opening statements, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was just trying to make his opening statement, the boilerplate, this is where we're at. And remember, this is the Senate, not the House, where they're facing a friendlier audience, let's be honest. Within moments of speaking, one by one, demonstrators started popping up. We have some tape here. You can get a sense of just what the demonstrators were calling for and how they were able to interrupt the hearing. Let's take a listen.
Since Hamas's appalling slaughter, I know that several
committee will suspend, and I again ask that those in the audience respect the people in the room and allow us to continue the hearing. The hearing will suspend until the disruption is removed.
Okay, so the disruption was removed, and then another disruption happened, and that was removed, and another, and another, and another. I think we got to 7 full sort of disruptions within that, and the last one was a whole group of people up and yelling, and as you heard, calling for a ceasefire, yelling at the senators for not doing enough to protect civilian lives in Gaza. All, of course, while the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense were out there just trying to make their case and the administration's case as to why Congress should fund both the military support for Ukraine and Israel, but also for humanitarian aid. So it just gives you a glimpse into how divided, how raucous, and how difficult a road is ahead for the Biden administration trying to get this through.
And so let's then talk about what specifically they're asking for. We're hearing from Blinken and from Austin. What are the specifics there?
Yeah, I mean, this whole package is like $105 billion, but really what we're talking about here are 3 main packets of spending. The main one, the big one, is actually for Ukraine and military support for Ukraine as that war has dragged on. The more consensus one is around Israel and support both for Israel and replenishment of their military stockpile, but also billions of dollars in aid that they're trying to get through the southern border to get to civilians. And how do you do that without it being diverted, shall we say, by and to Hamas? And then more money for the Pentagon itself, for the U.S. military to replenish its own stockpiles. We have a couple of clips here, but let's listen first to the Secretary of Defense talking about the war in Ukraine and why this isn't just like he's saying too many people are thinking about this as helping the war in Ukraine and that is kind of a standalone thing. And while it would help them, he says it will also help the United States. Let's take a listen.
Putin will not stop in Ukraine. We know that. We all know that. And so I think it's important to do what's necessary to support Ukraine and Israel and to help them defend their sovereign territory.
So really just kind of underlying the strategic interest of the United States in backing both of those conflicts. We also have Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who, remember, visited Israel in I think it was a day or two after the October 7th attacks by Hamas, and him talking very poignantly about the brutality of those attacks and about what happened on October 7th and how it sort of changed the way people will see that conflict, but why it's so imperative in the wake of that for the United States to support Israel through this.
no country could tolerate what Israel suffered on October 7th. And it's extraordinary the extent to which that day has receded in memory for so many.
Now, the other two major issues that came out of that were, one, as the demonstrators were calling for, calls for a ceasefire. Where does the Biden administration stand on that? And Blinken was very clear and said, look, he sees a ceasefire as merely an opportunity for Hamas to consolidate in these moments, to give them something of a break. The other question is around that aid, right? There's $9 billion in aid flagged for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. And he was asked quite pointedly, how do you make sure that that aid gets to those who need it, hospitals, UN aid services, whatever it may be, and not diverted to Hamas, who might use that fuel for its military fight against Israel. And he talked at length about how right now he hasn't seen any evidence that the aid they've been providing has been diverted, and that he believes the mechanisms to keep it, to get it through UN trucks across the border to UN staff, to a UN distribution point so it can be given to the people that need it most. But he also underlined you can't be 100% sure that this doesn't get diverted and that there will be, in his words, spillage of some of that aid. Not necessarily all of it is always going to go to where they want it to and where it's most needed, frankly. So it just gives a real glimpse into the task ahead of trying to get support for this, because it is not obvious how they will get that and where the administration is trying to underline why and how this support is so important.
Peter, thank you for this. That is the CBC's Peter Armstrong in Washington.